Hi there, I'm Jim.
And I'm Claire.
Let's talk teaching. Welcome to Let's Talk Teaching, a podcast from the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology here at Illinois State University. I'm Jim G. Joining me again, Dr. Claire LaMonica, our director. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, it's homecoming week.
It is.
And this year's homecoming theme, they have themes every year. Some years are easier. It's easier to relate to teaching and learning than others, I think. And this is one year that we kind of latched onto it. The theme is building a legacy.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to talk very briefly today. This is going to be a very short little episode where we just kind of talk a little bit about the legacies that we feel we're a part of in terms of teaching and learning and why we wanted to be teachers. So if we can start out, I want to ask you a question I've wanted to ask you for a long time on our podcast.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it's
You're
not.
scaring me.
Can I have a raise? No. No, not really. No, in all seriousness, did you always want to be a teacher?
I think I did. I think, well, I don't know. So when I was a kid, I said I wanted to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to write little things, but, I always loved playing school, and my poor brother and my dolls and,
Mm-hmm.
the neighbor kids and everything,
Right.
because I always wanted to be the teacher when we played school. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be the student. I did that at school. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't playing.
Right.
So and then when I was in high school, I thought I would go to college and major in journalism, because that was a way I could be a writer and still eat.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, my real motivation was that eventually I wanted to be a high school journalism teacher. So I had this in my mind that I would go and I would be like Brenda Starr for a few years, and then I would start teaching high school and I would teach high school journalism. So once I got to college and found out that if I wanted to teach high school journalism, I would have to have a teaching certificate,
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah,
not just a bachelor's degree in journalism. And B, that, being a journalist wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I just had this moment where I thought, I'm going to change and I did. I didn't ask anybody. I just went and changed my major. And then I called home and told my mom and dad, I'm like, hey, I changed my major. And they were so shocked. They were like, you what? I said, yeah, I'm going to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well, and you had teachers in the family, right?
Yes. Yeah. I say I'm a third generation college teacher. Both of my grandfathers were professors at Southern Illinois University, and my paternal grandmother taught math at SIU.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an uncle who was a dean at an English professor and a dean at a small college in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of something that I get from both sides of my family, I guess. I can remember going with at least one of my grandfathers to one of his college classes when he was teaching.
Oh, really?
And sitting
that's
kind
exciting.
of in the back of the
Yeah.
room. He must have, I don't know why I went. It's kind of my grandmother must have had something to do, and she was like, here, take this child to class with you. So I went and sat in the back of the room. So
I find that interesting because I had kind of a similar experience. Now, I went a little further in the journalism side of things.
Did.
But I always had in the back of my mind, I remember sitting, doing TV here at Illinois State way back in 1900, and sitting in the newsroom, and the news director at the time was a professor in the School of Communication, was talking, and got done, and we had he helped me out with the story and everything. And I thought, that's kind of cool. You know what? Maybe when I'm 60 or 70, I'll come back I'll retire from journalism. This would be great to come back and do this.
Yeah.
And it turns out I was like 35.
Yeah, but you were
know,
things
early.
moved along a little faster than you thought.
They did. Well, and I also realized that journalism wasn't necessarily, I think it's a noble profession. And I think it's important, but especially I was doing TV journalism. So there are people who self-identify as journalists who are sneering at me right now anyway.
They're like, you weren't a journalist.
You weren't a real journalist.
You were a producer.
I was a producer. I find teaching much more rewarding.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't wait until retirement.
Until you were retired.
Presuming I actually could survive that long in the business in this day and age.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So, was there someone who was instrumental to you? Because I always, we always talk about mentors. We talk about those important figures. And whenever I have conversations with people, even if they're not teachers, many of them, not all of them, but many of them often point to a teacher who was kind of an inspiration for them. Maybe not in terms of like a true mentor or even a true guru, or whatever you want to call him. But was there anyone that kind of inspired you or that you thought you would like to emulate someday?
I had a lot of good teachers growing up, and I'm not sure there was any one. I can remember really, really liking my 10th grade English teacher, and she was young. She must have been not too long out of school, and she did a lot of she was doing a lot of innovative things in her classroom, and I really liked that class. I'm really embarrassed because now I can't even remember her name, but she was, it'll come to me. I do remember it off and on. Yeah. But I don't think that she was like the only one. I had so many teachers that I liked. I actually only ever had, maybe one or two teachers that I didn't like.
It's the same with me. And of course, we both are people, we've talked about this before. We both liked school.
Yeah.
We both really liked school. And so I did have a conversation once with a colleague, not here at CTLT, but at another institution. And they said, I never had, because I had kind of asked, was there ever a teacher who, no, I really hated school. Now, why they got into the profession they got into eventually, I don't know.
They were a teacher?
Well, they were a professor. Perhaps they're more interested in doing research, which but they still taught and whatnot. And we were talking about teaching, so so people have had different experiences over the years and whatnot. I kind of agree with you that there was never like one teacher, although there were a couple of teachers that I latched onto at the time that I really felt got me.
You've talked about a couple of your teachers in the past when we've just sort of talked when we're not recording.
The ones that really took a personal interest in me, I had a 7th grade English teacher named Mrs. Richard, Bonnie Richard, who was about ready to retire. And she was one of those people who inspired me in life. First of all, and I don't know if we've ever actually talked about this even off mic. I grew up in the same town that my dad did. My mom and dad grew up in. So, I was second generation with some of these teachers. And so Mrs. Richard knew my name and knew me and knew what that smirk meant and knew what
she was on to you.
Yeah. And there was
she was on to you and your dad too.
She was on to me from birth, literally from my birth. And so, and she was really someone who was very supportive. She did the student council. She was one of the first teachers I encountered that I knew really cared about teaching because she was about ready to retire. She was done playing politics, and she had very strong opinions about whether students should be broken up into tracks, into an honors track, or run-of-the-mill track, or a remedial track, or whatever they would call it.
Was she for 'em or against 'em?
She was against 'em.
Yeah.
She was way against 'em.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, you would have liked her. You would have liked her because she really stuck to her guns. And I remember going back and talking to her when I was about to get into high school. She said, "What class did you take?" And I said, "Oh, I'm taking honors English." And she went,
"Oh dear."
I mean, she was supportive, but she stuck to her guns. And she retired shortly thereafter. So yeah. So
it's one of those things that kind of comes and goes. And it's different from district to district. So
you went back and you started teaching this semester again.
I did.
You had the opportunity to do that, and we'll do a little wrap up on that because
we need to because I taught my last class yesterday.
Yeah, as we're recording this, and it was an 8-week course as opposed to a 16-week course. So we'll get into that. But I guess my question is, how are you a different teacher now than you were when you were starting out, and maybe
oh my gosh.
Well,
I am so much better of a teacher now.
Well,
I am.
good.
You know what?
Yeah.
I think when I started my career, I was all about teaching, and now I'm all about learning.
Well,
so
and just figuring out what the difference is tough.
Yes,
sometimes.
Yeah, because I liked teaching initially. So we've talked about this before. I'm one of those oddballs in the at the university. I'm an extrovert, and initially the parts I loved about teaching was the standing up in front, the performance aspect.
Sure.
I loved being the center of attention in the classroom, and if the students laughed at my jokes, it was great. And it took me not very long, but it took me just a little while to figure out that that wasn't really what my job was. I wasn't there to be the center of attention and tell good jokes. So nowadays I'm more about what the students are doing than what I'm doing. And I really do. I'm not always successful. But I try really hard to practice what I preach and, really engage them in things that will help them learn rather than just sort of, talking at them or whatever. So anyway, my whole approach, my whole philosophy, everything is different now.
Well, so that would be a big message to deliver. But if you had a time machine, here's your final question for the day.
Oh, thank you.
If you had a time machine and you could go back and talk to yourself, the young Claire LaMonica, just starting out teaching, either high school or college or whatever, what would be the one most important piece of advice that you would give?
Get to know your students and do what you can to help each of them be the best that they can be at whatever it is that they're trying to learn in your class. So that's really hard. And it's I say that with the knowledge that there are people listening to this who have 200-300 students at a shot, in one classroom, and saying get to know your students is, totally unrealistic. But I think all of us know that the times that we're most successful are when we're being mentors, when we're creating legacies.
Yeah.
And so we're working with students in smaller groups or one-on-one and really passing along that legacy, that, whatever it was that somebody gave us, passing that along to the next sort of generation of educators or of scientists or whatever it is that we're working with.
Sure. And
broadcasters
even. I think when you're talking about, if you have a class of 200 or 300 students, I would say yes, you have to recognize that you're not going to be able to get to know all of them as well as maybe you would like to, or you feel like you should, but at least create opportunities for those who want to engage with you like that to do that. I think that's a big, that teaching on that kind of a stage, there's a barrier there.
Yeah. Because it's literally a stage.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
Talk about stage on the stage. You've got a real stage.
So you have to create some sort of opening for them that's welcoming and whether it's having more like group office hours or something like that. And we can talk about those techniques or something in another episode. But I think the sentiment is spot on. So
yeah. So, but I have to turn that around on you now. So what advice would you give not so much younger, because, it's not like you've been doing this for 45 years like some of us. But
no, that's true. But it's been, I started teaching about 11 years ago now. So it's been 11 years. Yeah. But see, the thing is, aspects of my jobs, plural, that I had when I was in TV, those aspects that I enjoyed were ones that were as closest to being a teacher, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, I think journalism is a very worthy profession. And, I advocate for good journalism all of the time. I think it's more critical than ever in our society. And I enjoyed some of that, but I did not enjoy managing people, which is something that I found I was doing more and more. The one aspect of my job I did enjoy was working with younger reporters and younger producers and sitting down with them one-on-one and working on the writing. Now, some of that is an egotistical exercise, just like you want to, you liked being at the center of the classroom. Right. You like being the guy with the answers. The trick, though, is that what I really found I ended up being pretty good at was not only giving them how you should do it, but why you should write it this way, or how why we should pursue this angle of the story. So I was doing so it was the teaching aspect, and so when I got the opportunity to leave commercial broadcast local television and go teach down at Southern Illinois University. I was my teaching position. I wasn't actually faculty. I was actually a staff member, but I was running the television newsroom down there. And then I taught one class a semester. So I was kind of a non-tenure track AP staff member. And, it was kind of a natural transition there. I just kind of did more of what I liked.
Yeah.
Which was great.
There's a deal.
So obviously I'm avoiding answering your question, though. What would I tell? I think I would go back in time and tell myself not to take teaching personally. In fact, I would go back in time.
Good advice.
I would go back in time and tell myself not to take most things personally. I would go find a 6-year-old Jimmy G and say, dude,
don't take it
chill.
personally.
Yeah, because I think so much anxiety in my life and so much angst was born out of, and when you take things personally, it's born out of insecurity, right?
Yeah. Well, but it's really hard not to do that. And I was reminded of that again, as I was teaching this, even this semester, and a student disappeared, just quit coming to class.
Right. Yeah.
And it was so hard for me to, remind myself, no, it doesn't mean that he hated you.
Right.
It doesn't mean that he hated, I mean, it's very difficult not to take that personally.
And that's that's the thing I run into all the time when I talk to faculty members about mobile technology in the classroom and smartphones. It's not just that they're not probably learning as well. That's an important part of it. It should probably be the most important part of when you have a discussion about should you allow phones and how do you control this stuff in the classroom. But part of it is it's distracting. And why is it distracting to you, the teacher? Because they're not paying attention, and that's offensive.
Right. It's an affront.
It's an affront. It's uncivil.
Like an affront. Yeah.
It is uncivil behavior and all that. Well, so I would go back in time and tell myself to chill.
Well, always good advice.
There you go. Well, Claire, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Let's Talk Teaching. Find out more about our podcast at our website, ctlt.illinoisstate.edu. Click on the podcast link in the upper right of the page, and you can see show notes for today's episode and also past episodes you may want to check out. For Dr. Claire LaMonica and all my colleagues here at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, until we talk again, happy teaching.